You're listening to Crystal and Emily on Love Your Shelf, the best librarian podcast in the extensive and highly competitive field of librarian podcasts.
Hey.
Hello. So, it's Friday.
Yeah, it is. Which doesn't mean anything to us this week because we are working on Saturday. And having to kind of get back in that habit.
It is. It's hopefully we will fall back into that habit easily.
Yeah.
But yes, yeah. And because this summer we're going to ramp up and we're going to have events in the evenings and on Saturdays and we'll be busy.
Yeah, we're back, man.
But today and tomorrow we've got our escape room, Sunken Treasure.
Oh, it's a good one.
It's fun, yeah.
But yeah, it's worth it.
Oh yeah.
So
no, it is. It's worth it. So I have a ton of new nonfiction recommendations this week. Had some big orders come in, and so I had to get caught up on my reviewing of all of those. So we've got some good ones, I think.
All right, hit me.
Yeah, all right. The first one is The Climate Diet, 50 Simple Ways to Trim Your Carbon Footprint by Paul Greenberg.
Mm-hmm.
And he writes on sustainability and food.
Okay.
And it's very succinct. It's a small book. And it's just things that you can do in your own life, in part to, make a change, but also, to feel like you're doing your part and and not just to, live friendly to the planet, but a lot of the things can also impact you in other ways too. So
sure.
Yeah. So it's seemingly very simple, but there's a lot of really good suggestions to start making some positive changes. So I would definitely recommend that one.
Yeah.
And you can read it really quickly too, which is also, a bonus for busy people.
Yes. Well, and I just think, especially with information like that, I think that's, the best way to get to more people, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, you don't want to feel, and sometimes, I feel about the climate as well as, other issues that we're facing is overwhelming.
Yes.
And where do you start?
And
so
you don't
starting somewhere.
You don't want to feel like you have to, read a textbook.
Right. Or completely, turn your life upside down.
Sure.
And go overboard. You want to do things that are sustainable, that you can, dip your toe in and then maybe do another thing and then, make small changes to make a bigger change, right?
Totally. Love that.
Yeah. And then another small book, she writes a lot of small books, actually. Rebecca Solnit, I've talked about her before.
Okay.
She has a book coming out later this year, much later, I think. But the one that just came out recently is called Whose Story Is This? Old Conflicts, New Chapters. And so they're all related somewhat, at least in terms of maybe tone and perspective, but they're about different topics. Each chapter is a different essay.
Okay.
And she's the author of Men Explain Things to Me, which is one of my favorite books.
Yes.
And so this is sort of in that same vein, for sure. And I love her writing. I'll read whatever she writes.
Sure.
And so she's
done it again.
Done it again, yes. And it's also, too, for busy people, you can read an essay here or there.
Yes.
Flip through and find something that looks especially appealing, and then come back to it later.
Yes.
I definitely like that kind of reading more than I used to, because it is something that you can get it in digestible bites,
Yes, I was going to bring this up later, and I won't go into too much detail now, but I've been reading Anne Lamott's new book, Dusk, Night, Dawn. And it's the, she most of her books are the same way. It's just sort of a collection of essays. And I was having the exact same thought. Just yeah, it kind of suits my my life and my schedule in that way.
Mm-hmm. Because I mean, obviously, I read a lot when I talk about
Mm-hmm.
books. Like I think the recording before last, I was talking about like 800-page book that I just
Right.
gobbled down in a few days. But you don't always have that kind of time, and I hate to start something, especially something that has an intricate plot or it's super
Yes.
long. If you
Yes.
don't think you're going to have the time to
Yes.
get through it, then you're going to leave it aside, and then you're going to forget
Yes.
everything that's
Or
happened.
if you're, I mean, and again, I think this was kind of the case with you in this book. If it's something I'm so into and can't put down,
That is a
I
problem.
will make that the priority in my life. And it's not always the healthiest decision, most responsible decision.
Right.
So yeah. Yeah. So anyway, so for that reason, I enjoy that kind of writing and kind of book as well.
Oh, yeah. Well, the rest of the stuff that I'm going to talk about is not that, but also good.
Great.
Yeah. Um, Stephen Johnson is the author of the next one. He has written several really um, great nonfiction books recently. One is called How We Got to Now,
Hmm.
and Where Good Ideas Come From.
Hmm.
And so the most recent one is Extra Life, A Short History of Living Longer.
Mm.
And so it basically starts with the fact that as a species, our life expectancy has doubled in the last 100 years.
Right.
And so, you've got increases in public health,
Hmm.
standards of living have gone
Hmm.
up, medical breakthroughs have come about. And so it's really intriguing um, to think
Yeah.
about, because there's people who are, working on research to stop aging. And I mean, there's just
Hmm.
like, there's tons of information out there. And I think, we kind of, our generation maybe takes some of that for granted.
Hmm.
But since it has been, you know, relatively short amount of time, there's also a little bit of a sci-fi feeling about some of the
Yeah.
things, right?
Oh, totally.
Um, so it's really interesting. It also ties into not just what's going on with science and
Hmm.
medicine, but also activists who are struggling to reform systems. And there's of course government
Hmm.
issues.
Hmm.
Big corporations often are
Hmm.
involved in all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And so it's a very complex situation, and it's a really good book
Yeah.
to cover that.
Yeah. Wow. I saw something recently on, I'm really switching gears here, but it has to do with what you're talking about. On, it might have been TikTok or something. And it was a guy talking about how, like, he was like me at age 26, and it shows him like sitting on the couch eating Cheetos or something. And then it says, my father at 26, and he walks in the room and is like, "Hi honey, I'm home, just made partner at the law firm," or whatever. And then it goes on and on with, his, past generations. And then it gets to like my great or great great grandfather, and he's on his deathbed at 26. And just I it's I just recently saw that, and it's funny that, yeah,
Yeah,
that's what
that is
what your
funny.
book is about.
Yeah, it's and then of course, since we're living in COVID times where we can see how rapidly not only can situations change, but
Right.
also how rapidly we can and we have to respond to that,
Right. Right.
as a species. So,
Yes.
um, very relevant, really, really good book.
Cool.
And the next one is also relevant, but in a different way. It's called The Empathy Diaries, a memoir by
Mhm.
Sherry Turkle.
Mhm.
And Sherry Turkle has been around for decades. Um, she had worked at MIT,
Mhm.
and she's a psychologist, and wrote a lot about in the 90s about how we as humans interact with machines
Mhm.
and technology. And so I had researched her and her work years ago when I was doing that kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
And
Mhm.
and so she's come out with this book that's like part reflection on all of her um, discoveries and theories that she's, you know, written about over all these years, but it's
Uh-huh.
also about herself. It's a memoir. So um, it talks about basically like her parents,
Mhm.
how her interactions with them impacted her life,
Yeah.
um, and then of course, you know, growing up, she sort of came of age in the 60s, and then had to fight her way as a woman, you know,
Mhm.
into MIT.
Right. Oh,
So
yeah.
not only is it MIT, which is already, you know,
Prestigious
heavily,
and
yeah, it's
yeah,
prestigious, but it's heavily
science and
weighted toward, yeah, the men,
yes.
essentially. And so not only is she a psychologist,
Mhm.
which people sometimes call like the soft science, right? So
Mhm.
so she had those battles to fight.
Oh man, yeah. The
And
triple threat, man.
yeah, and she's just really great. And um, one of the New York Times book reviews said it's an instant classic, and so I
Cool.
totally agree. And I would also recommend reading her previous stuff. She's also written um, books called Reclaiming Conversation
Mhm.
and Alone Together, which again,
Cool.
like I said, all of this is very relevant to our time now, I think.
Yes, I think I told you recently that we have just got a new children's book in called Alone Together and or Being Alone Together. And it doesn't
Hmm.
outright say anything about COVID, but it is.
About not being able to be with people that you
Yeah,
love.
yeah, no. And anyway. Well, that's excellent.
Yeah. And then another one is another small book, and it's called Fixation: How to Have Stuff Without Breaking the Planet,
Uh-huh.
by Sandra Goldmark. And it's another, like, kind of in the vein of, you know, what can you do, small steps, you know?
Mhm. Mhm.
Her specific take on it is she sort of came to the idea, or the ideas that are in the book, because as a young mother, she had her vacuum cleaner break,
Mhm.
and or some, you know, some kind of household appliance, and
Uh-huh.
then her backpack fell apart, and then her toaster stopped working, whatever. So it just turned to, you know, and I know that I have this in my life too, where both at home and at work, where, you know, one day something's working, the next day it isn't, and then it basically becomes trash. It
Right.
becomes garbage that you then either have sitting around, it's useless.
Yes.
And so her response was to found something called Fix Up, which is a pop-up repair shop. And so she
Oh.
learned how to, she and other people, you know, like, learned how to repair stuff.
Right.
And I just was talking to someone about this last week. We've had some repair cafes here, like where
Mhm.
people bring stuff that's broken, and people who are good at fixing stuff, uh, you know, help with that. And there's also been you know, similar responses to this, where there's less, like, the, you know, a place where people take their broken stuff, and they might, it's not like a place where they're paying to have it repaired, but
Uh-huh.
rather they bring it, and then there's sort of like a collective of people who, you know, in their off time go and tinker and, you know,
Oh.
either repair things or reuse them or remake them into something new. And
Ugh.
so there's lots of opportunities for that. There's lots of ways that you can do that, but I think it's another one of those things that seems like an insurmountable challenge. Like, if
Yes.
you and I look at our toaster, we have very limited knowledge of how that's working.
Yes. Exactly. And
And
I'm
so,
someone too who feels so guilty throwing things away. And so
mhm.
instead, it'll sit around taking up space. And I never come up with a plan for it. And then until one day, years later, I
After you've thrown it
finally,
away.
I was going to say, then I'm finally like, I guess I'll just throw it away. And I'm exaggerating kind of. But yeah, no, I think that's so fantastic.
Yeah, and, obviously, um, this is, a bigger statement. It's not just about her pop-up repair
Sure,
stuff that she
sure.
does, but also, you know, thinking about it as a consumer before you buy
Yes.
it.
Yeah.
Like, because you can get a super cheap toaster or a really, inexpensive microwave or whatever, but if that microwave breaks,
Yep.
you're not going to be able to fix that. I mean, some of the things
No.
you can,
Yeah.
but like a lot, especially now, like a lot of digital type devices, it wears out
Yeah.
and it's out. You're not fixing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Or
so,
you have to, research how to, and yeah, it takes
yeah, but
time
a lot of times they're just made to not last
to
very
not.
long.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
so, if it's well made, it is something that you could potentially repair.
Right. Right.
Um, so, it's that kind of thing is thinking about in the long term
Mm-hmm.
and not just going for the throwaway quick stuff.
Sure. Sure.
Which, and the same thing goes with clothes and
Mm-hmm.
shoes and your, like your um, accessories, like your purse and your belt or
Right.
whatever,
Right.
all of those
Mm-hmm.
things can be, repurposed, reused if they're of
Mm-hmm.
good quality. If they're
Right.
not, if they fall apart entirely, then not a whole lot you can do
It's
about it.
wasteful. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
And
Well,
so we'll,
perfect.
on that note, I think we will be excited to. We don't have a plan for it just yet, but and I know that there's been other community organizations that are wanting to do them too, but
Mm-hmm.
to have clothes swaps or
Yeah. Yeah.
have a swap, which
Yeah.
we've done. We used to do twice a year,
Yeah.
and be looking
Yeah.
forward to getting back into that because
Definitely.
people definitely need to do that. Where the use for me is no longer whether you know outgrow your clothes or your kids outgrow their clothes or
Right.
books that you've already read or whatever. There's always something that
Yeah.
you have had all the use of it that you
Yeah.
need, but somebody else could want it too. So
Well, and I'm trying to think what it was at the last clothing swap where it might have been old like rags or something, something that you're just like, who would ever use this? Or what, maybe it was old t-shirts or something. And eventually, or somebody said, hold on to these because they can use them at the animal shelter. And yeah, I mean, you just never know. You never know where something could be useful and how. And yeah.
yeah, yeah. So um, and it's a good book. It's an interesting book about how somebody takes their ambition and their drive
Hmm.
and comes up with a creative idea and makes it happen. So
Yeah, cool.
yeah. And then my last nonfiction book, at least,
Hmm.
that I want to mention is Dessert Person. So this is a
Oh my gosh.
little bit of a shift. It's called Recipes and Guidance for Baking with Confidence by Claire Saffitz.
Oh my gosh.
And
Dessert person.
yeah,
I feel called out.
I don't have it very much, but I do love it.
Hmm.
Like I don't eat a lot of sugar just
But
on,
when you do,
but especially I don't care for like just garbage sweet stuff, but
oh,
something that is lovingly prepared.
yeah,
That's what I'm talking about.
I want it all. Give me the garbage. Give me the class. I want
I
it
mean,
all.
I have my garbage days too,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
so she's from this is her first cookbook, and she works with Bon Appetit, which
Hmm.
I've talked about before. I love it. I love their videos. I love their magazines. Wonderful.
Excellent.
And so I've been watching her and reading from her for years and years, and so glad she has a book out. But
Cool.
she makes really unique stuff,
Hmm.
and also has a really cool, like, the way that the book is laid out.
Hmm.
It's, you can tell that these have been tested, and she has this whole like um, index in the front where it basically has like the difficulty level
Hmm.
scale and then the amount of time that it takes. And so
Nice.
if you're new to baking in
Uh-huh.
particular or cooking in general, then you can start slow
Right.
and work
Right.
your way up. And in a lot of recipes, you don't necessarily know that until you get into it.
Right. Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, is if you aren't familiar, you can't tell by looking at just oftentimes you can't tell by looking at a recipe. So
Right.
spell it out for me.
Right. It's like that classic scene from where David and Moira are trying to cook
Uh-huh.
in
I'm
in
trying to
the
think.
show.
Yeah, on Schitt's Creek. Yes.
Yes. And
Uh
and she's like, fold in the cheese. And he's like, what does fold in the cheese
oh
mean?
my gosh, yes.
So if you
Eh,
don't know basic terms, you're not gonna realize it
yes.
until you're like, hey, actually, what does that mean to do? And if you
Uh,
haven't watched that show, go
yeah,
out and watch it today.
on another note, absolutely.
Yeah. So hilarious.
So hilarious.
But so she is appealing to all levels, and
Hmm.
also you can work your way up once as you're like practicing new skills. And
Yeah.
she also gives like if you have things that don't turn out right, what do you do?
Ah, how you
That's the
can sort of
thing too, that
repurpose your dessert.
yeah, like if your pie dough cracks, what do you do?
Mm,
um
so
and that's a
smart.
yeah, chefs don't always give you that information.
Right.
They're
Yeah.
like, if you do this perfectly and the temperature is perfect outside and inside,
Yeah.
and all the
Here.
things work out, this is
Yes.
this is what will happen. But you don't always have those things. So
No, no, exactly. Oh, I love that.
yeah. Oh, and I lied. I do have another nonfiction one
Yeah.
to
Oh,
mention.
please.
This one is not coming out until later this year.
Hmm.
Um, and I kind of think of this writer as being very along the same lines as Rebecca Solnit. Her name's Siri Hustvedt,
Uh-huh.
and I'm sure I've mentioned her books before, but her next book that's coming out is Mothers, Fathers, and Others,
Uh-huh.
and it's this essay collection. And she just really like dives deep into what it means to be a human being and the relationships that we have with our family. And then she also talks about um, mothers and family and families
Hmm.
in uh, families and family. Anyway, mothers and fathers and
Family on
family,
family. Sorry. And what?
and in like Jane Austen and in
Oh,
contemporary art. And
yeah.
she's so well read and knows about everything, from art to film to literature, and she just weaves all of that into her own sort of internal, you know,
Ah,
questioning or whatever.
yeah. Okay. This sounds super up my alley.
Oh, you would love it. All of her. Well, she has several collections of essays that are all the like along the same lines, where
Uh-huh.
she just talks, heavily about her interpretation of art and theories and stuff
Yeah.
like that. But
Yeah. Cool.
yeah, so Siri Hustvedt, check her out. She also
Love
has
it.
written some brilliant novels too. Some of my favorite
Cool.
books.
Oh my gosh, cool. Well, yeah, I'm gonna have to ask you about that one.
Yeah. And then I have some shows that I've watched. I haven't watched that much lately,
Yeah.
um, as I was mentioning earlier, but to you,
Mm-hmm.
not here. You didn't miss anything.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I was looking for something a little bit mindless the other day and
Yes.
saw that HBO has a new series with Ellen DeGeneres called
Mm-hmm.
Ellen's Next Great Designer.
Yeah.
And that's one of I didn't mention it before on Guilty Pleasures
Mm.
episode, but um, like living design,
Oh,
architectural design, that kind of
yes.
stuff, I can really geek
Eat
out
it
for
up.
that. Yeah.
Yes, I'm with you.
And it was hilarious. I have just watched the first episode. And so
Hmm.
they're given like these raw materials, like a slab of marble and a stone
Oh my gosh.
and a tree trunk, basically. And they're like, okay, make a, coffee table.
Oh my goodness. Okay, I had no idea that that was because yeah, that was what was going on here. I
Yeah.
thought it was gonna be like another Project Runway or something, which
Mm.
I love Project Runway. Don't get me wrong, but I was just kind of like, do we need another
We need
one?
another one? No.
Yeah, but okay, this changes
But
everything.
furniture design and room
Yeah.
design, yes.
Ooh.
And so it's funny, I can't remember the name of one of the judges, but he's like, as long as we don't see a slab of wood cantilevered on a stone, I'm gonna be happy. And then like two of them were exactly that.
Ooh. Yep.
And then some of them were just amazing, and they had
Remarkable.
like a limited amount of time to do it. And anyway, if you're into that kind of thing, I highly recommend that show.
Yeah, I'm gonna check it out. That's cool.
My other lighthearted selection was a Black Lady sketch show, which is
Uh
also
huh.
on HBO.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I really wanted to enjoy it, but
Oh no.
it wasn't as funny. And I've only watched the first episode of it.
Yeah.
So, with sketch shows, sometimes they're hit or miss. So
It's true. It's true.
I'll I'll give it another chance, but I
Yeah.
was I was bummed.
Man, yeah, no, that's one I've been wanting to watch as well. I have it on my list. But yeah, I was rooting for that one.
I know. Well, we'll try it again. I'll
Yeah,
report back if it changes my
yes, keep
opinion
me
later.
posted. Absolutely.
And then the final thing I want to talk about
Mhm.
is Afterlife with
Mhm.
Ricky Gervais, and it's on
Yeah.
Netflix. And it is it's a black comedy,
Yes.
which,
Yes.
yeah, not surprising coming from Ricky Gervais, but um,
Right.
it even for him, it was heavy. And so I watched the first episode because I'm a fan of his
Mhm.
a while back,
Mhm.
and I just said, That's too sad for me.
Yep.
I can't watch that."
Yep.
And then my sister said, "Oh no, you should stick with it." And it's really good.
You're so glad you did.
I'm so glad I did.
Cuz
And
yeah.
there's another season out that I haven't seen, but I'm gonna fire that up this weekend. But basically, the premise is that Ricky Gervais' character, his wife dies,
Mhm.
and he thinks about committing suicide, but
Mhm.
he decides that he's not going to do that, but that he's going to say or do whatever comes to mind, like whatever he wants to do. And he thinks of it as his superpower, right?
Okay.
Like, you can't, I will be brutally honest. I
Yeah,
will
you can't touch
behave
me.
in whatever manner I want to, and you can't do anything.
Okay.
And then the people who, he interacts with, um, they all like reject his premise,
Su-
his
His
yeah,
superpower.
his superpower. They're like, no, we're
You're
here
just
for you.
being really mean.
Yeah, exactly. And so he's a journalist, so he has a job and he's going to work, but he's like treating everybody around him like garbage,
Hmm.
and they just aren't having it. And so,
Right.
and they all go in their different ways, go about trying to uh affect him in a positive way.
Huh.
And so it's good.
Yeah, because
Really,
I
really
did
good.
the same thing that you did. I watched the first episode and thought it was too sad, and so I'm gonna check it out. Back
Yeah.
out.
Yeah. I mean, even it is super touching. Like, he has a dog,
Hmm.
and I love my dog, my
Hmm.
dogs. And
Hmm.
he sort of, kind of talks to the dog and is like,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, I would just, end it all, but here you are and you're
Right.
useless. You can't take care of yourself, so I got to take care of you.
Right.
And it's silly and funny, but it's also
And
so
sad.
touching and sad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah,
Well,
so
cool.
check it out.
I will check it back out. Cool.
And I think we're going to have to end this one early because we've got to go have another session of
Yeah.
Sunken Treasure Escape Room.
Sunken Treasure Escape Room.
Yeah.
Well, cool.
All right. Well, we will see and hear you back
You will hear
next
us
week. Yeah,
next
exactly.
week.
We can't hear you, but would love to. So
Just listen to
stop
us,
by. Yeah.
please.
Exactly. So, yeah. Well, on that note, we will sign off for today.
That's a good plan. Bye.
Bye.